On to section 10.5, page 599, dealing with exponential functions now and evaluating exponential functions. So number 2, we are given this exponential function, h of x is 2 to the x, and we are asked to evaluate this function for different inputs for x. So for 2a, we want to evaluate what is this function evaluated for an input of -3. Well, all we're doing here is plugging in -3 for x, 2 to the -3rd. We know our rules of exponents. Any value raised to a negative exponent is 1 over that value raised to the positive exponent. So that's what we're going to look at here. And look at 2 to the -3rd as 1 over 2 to the 3rd. We know what 2 to the 3rd is. 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. So we end up with our answer of 1/8. All right, and we're also asked to evaluate this for a value of 0. H of 0, and we're just putting 0 in for x. And we remember that anything raised to an exponent of 0 is 1. So our answer here is 1. Anything raised to a 0 exponent is the number 1. And C, we want h of 2. Again, just plugging 2 into the formula for the function given. 2 squared, we know what 2 squared is, it's 4. So that's our answer. Right? Pretty easy stuff. It gets a little more difficult if the exponent is a function itself, but not too much. Number 4, we are asked to evaluate f of -4. We are asked to evaluate f of -1. And we are asked to evaluate f of 0. So just like we did here, we're plugging -4 in for x. In this case, we're getting 3 raised to the -4 minus 2, which leaves us with 3 raised to the -6th, which, just like over here, negative exponent is 1 over that number raised to the positive exponent. So we get 1 over 3 raised to the 6th. 3 raised to the 6th is going to be a pretty large number. 3 raised to the 6th is 729. So 1 over 729 is the answer for A. And be sure to give fractions for these answers. You can plug these into your calculator. I'm going to show you that in a second when we deal with, with the number E. But I'd like to see you actually work it out like this. -2 plus -4 is -6. 1 over 3 raised to the positive 6th, 1 over 729. That's an exact value. If we put -1 in for x, we get 3 raised to the -1 minus 2, or 3 raised to the -3rd. Again, 1 over 3 raised to the 3rd, or 1 over 27 in this case. And 0, we get 3 raised to the 0 minus 2. So that's 3 raised to the -2nd, 1 over 3 squared, or 1/9. All right, so evaluating exponential functions. Now I also want to look at one on the calculator. This is going to be number 8 in your book. And this one is h of x equaling e to the x over 2. Okay, and we want to find h of 4, h of -2, and h of 1/2. All right, so I'm going to show you how to do this one on the calculator. Since that base of e is something we don't really want to have to do in our heads. So let's go to the calculator here. All right. And we got our nice little calculator here. Bring this over to the center, make it look good. And make sure it's on. And notice you're going to have a couple of buttons here for E. You have this button here, which just gives you E. If you go second function, E, and hit enter, you're going to get that number E. If you use this button over here, this sets you up for an exponent. So if you go second function, this one, now you're going to get set up with E and ready to put an exponent in there. Okay, so we were doing E raised to the x over 2, and we wanted h of 4. So we're going to put 4 over 2. I mean, you could just say 2, but you can say 4 divided by 2. And that's going to be your answer for A. Let's round to 2 decimals and say 7.39. And if we put negative 2 into that function, E raised to the negative 2 over 2. So let's put it in parentheses just to be sure. Negative 2 divided by 2, which is just negative 1, right? If we hit enter to 2 decimals, let's say 0.37. And if h is 1/2, then E raised to the, let's again put it in parentheses, and say negative 1/2 divided by 2. So we can say negative 0.5 divided by 2, close the parentheses, and get our answer there, 0.78. Okay, so sometimes you can use the calculator to get your answers. And I just wrote those, what we just did there. Our function was e to the x over 2. We put in 4 to get e to the 2, right? 4 over 2, e squared gives us this number. We put negative 2 in, we get e to the negative first, or 1 over e. That gives us this number. And 1/2 divided by 2 is e to the 1/4. We plug that into our calculator, and we get 0.78. Right? So that's evaluating exponential functions.